The next morning, Hana woke up before her alarm. She had always been an early riser, and the excitement of her first real day at the academy made it impossible to sleep in. Cairo was still sleeping, so she got dressed quietly and went to the cafeteria for breakfast. The cafeteria was huge with tables that could seat thousands of cadets. Food dispensers lined the walls, offering meals for dozens of different species. Hana found the section marked for omnivores and selected something that looked like scrambled eggs, but tasted much better than Earth eggs. She found an empty table and sat down to eat. Other cadets were starting to arrive for breakfast, and many of them stared at her as they walked past. Some looked curious, but others looked hostile. Hana tried to ignore them and focused on her food. A shadow fell across her table, and she looked up to see 3 older cadets standing there. The one in the middle was Torwin, the 4th-year cadet that Cairo had warned her about. His 2 friends flanked him on either side, looking ready for trouble. "So you are the famous human Deathworlder," Torwin said with a smirk. "You look smaller than I expected," Hana continued eating without looking up. "I get that a lot," she said. Torwin sat down across from her without being invited. His friends remained standing like guards. "Do you know what happened to the last human who tried to attend this academy?" he asked. Hana finally looked up at him. "I heard he transferred to a different school," she said. He was asked to leave, Torwin corrected, after he put 3 cadets in the medical bay during a training exercise. "Humans are too violent to be trusted with advanced military training." "That depends on the human," Hana said calmly. Torwin leaned forward. "I think all humans are the same," he said. "Savage creatures from a savage world who do not belong among civilized species." Hana finished her breakfast and stood up. She was shorter than Torwin, but something about the way she moved made his friends take a step back. "I guess we will find out," she said, and walked away. The first few weeks of classes were harder than Hana expected. The academics were challenging because they covered topics that did not exist on Earth. She had to learn about alien biology, political systems, and technologies that seemed like magic to her human mind. But the physical training was where Hana really struggled, not because it was too hard, but because it was too easy. The obstacle courses were designed for the average galactic species, which meant they were not challenging enough for someone from a high-gravity death world. When Hana completed the courses in record time, her instructors did not know what to do with her. During combat training, things got more complicated. The practice weapons were designed to deliver stunning shocks that would disable most species. When Hana was hit by them, she barely felt anything. Her human nervous system was too different from the galactic standard for the weapons to work properly. In tactical simulations, Hana excelled. Her human brain had evolved to think about hunting and warfare in ways that other species found difficult to understand. She could predict enemy movements and develop strategies that surprised even the instructors. But it was during a zero-gravity combat exercise that everything went wrong. The exercise was supposed to be simple. Cadets were paired up and had to try to disable their opponent using non-lethal techniques. Hana was paired with Veltar, a Korthak cadet who was known for being quick and flexible. Korthak were thin aliens with long limbs that could bend in impossible ways. The exercise began, and Veltar immediately tried to wrap his arms around Hana from behind. She had been warned that Korthak were excellent grapplers, so she was ready for this move. What she was not ready for was how fragile he would be compared to a human. Hana grabbed Veltar's wrist and twisted to break his grip. On Earth, this would have been a simple defensive move that might cause some discomfort, but no real injury. But Veltar's bones were hollow like a bird's to help him move in his homeworld's low gravity. The sound of bones breaking echoed through the training chamber. Veltar screamed and floated away from Hana, clutching his broken wrist. Blood was leaking from where the bone had pushed through his skin. The exercise stopped immediately. Medical teams rushed in to help Veltar, while instructors surrounded Hana. She tried to explain that she had not meant to hurt him, but the damage was already done. Veltar was taken to the medical bay while Hana was sent to the disciplinary office. News of the incident spread quickly through the academy. By dinner time, everyone was talking about how the human cadet had broken another student's bones during a routine exercise. The stories got more dramatic with each telling until some cadets believed Hana had nearly killed Veltar on purpose. Hana tried to visit Veltar in the medical bay to apologize, but he refused to see her. His friends told her that in Korthak, culture causing injury through carelessness was considered a grave insult. They said Veltar felt dishonored and would not forgive her easily. The incident changed everything for Hana. Cadets who had been curious about her now avoided her completely. Instructors watched her more carefully during exercises, and some seemed afraid of her. Even Cairo was more nervous around her, though he tried to hide it. During classes, Hana noticed that other cadets would not sit near her. In the cafeteria, entire tables would empty when she approached. She started eating alone and spending most of her free time in her room studying. But not everyone avoided her. Torwin and his friends seemed more interested in her than ever. They would appear wherever she went, making comments just loud enough for her to hear. They called her dangerous and unstable. They said humans were too primitive to understand restraint. One evening, Hana was in the library studying for an exam on galactic law when Torwin approached her table. He was alone this time, which was unusual since he normally traveled with his group of followers. That was quite a performance in combat training the other day. He said, sitting down across from her, it was an accident. Hana replied without looking. Up from her book. Of course it was, Torwin said with mock sympathy. Just like it will be an accident next time. And the time after that. Humans cannot help themselves, can they? Hana closed her book and looked at him. What do you want? I want you to understand something, Torwin said, leaning forward. This academy has rules and traditions. There is a hierarchy that must be respected. New cadets, especially human cadets, need to learn their place. And what place is? That Hana asked. Below their betters, Torwin said with a smile. Below species that have evolved beyond primitive violence. Hana gathered her books and started to leave, but Torwin grabbed her wrist. His grip was strong, but nothing compared to what Hana was used to. She could have easily broken free, but she controlled herself and simply looked down at his hand. Let go, she said quietly. Torwin held on for a moment longer, then released her. Think about what I said, he told her. It would be unfortunate if you had another accident. Hana left the library without another word, but she knew this was not over. Torwin was not just a bully, he was planning something. She could see it in his eyes and in the way he talked about accidents. Back in her room, Cairo was studying at his desk. He looked up when she entered and could see that she was upset. What happened? He asked. Your friend Torwin paid me a visit, Hana said. He is not my friend, Cairo said quickly. What did he want? To remind me of my place. Hana replied. Cairo put down his book and turned to face her. Hana, you need to be very careful, he said. Torwin has a lot of influence here. His family is powerful and he has friends among the faculty. I'm not afraid of him, Hana said. Maybe you should be, Cairo replied. He is not just going to leave you alone. And after what happened with Veltar, everyone will believe it is your fault if there is more trouble. Hana sat on her bed and thought about this. She knew Cairo was right, but she also knew she could not just submit to Torwin's demands. If she showed weakness, now he would never stop pushing her. What would you do? She asked Cairo. I would try to stay out of his way, Cairo said honestly. But I am not human. I do not have your pride or your strength. That night, Hana lay in bed thinking about her situation. She had come to the academy to prove that humans could work with other species. Instead, she was becoming more isolated every day. The incident with Veltar had made things worse, and Torwin was clearly planning to make her life even more difficult. But Hana was not ready to give up. She had survived on Earth, which was more dangerous than anything the Academy could throw at her. If Torwin wanted a fight, he would get one, but it would not go the way he expected. The transport ship made a loud noise as it landed on the metal platform of Nexus Prime. Hana looked out the small window and saw the biggest buildings she had ever seen in her life. They were so tall they seemed to touch the sky and made of some shiny metal that reflected the light from 3 different suns. This was the most famous military school in the entire galaxy, and she was really here. Hana picked up her small bag that had everything she owned. Her hands were shaking a little, but not from fear. She was excited. All her life, people told her that humans were too wild and too dangerous to join the galactic military. They said humans came from a death world and could never learn to work with other species. Hana wanted to prove them all wrong. The door of the transport ship opened with a hiss, and Hana stepped out. The air smelled different here. It was cleaner than Earth air and had a strange, sweet smell she could not identify. The gravity felt a little lighter, too, which made her feel like she could jump really high if she wanted to. Other cadets were walking around the landing platform, and they all stopped to stare at her. Hana knew she looked different from them. Most of the aliens were taller and had different colored skin. Some had extra arms or legs. A few had scales instead of skin. But they all stopped what they were doing to look at the human girl who had just arrived. One group of cadets was whispering to each other and pointing at her. Hana could not hear what they were saying, but she could guess. Everyone in the galaxy had heard stories about humans, and most of those stories were not good ones. They said humans were violent and unpredictable. They said humans could not control their emotions and would attack anyone who made them angry. Hana walked toward the main building following the signs that said, "New cadets report here." She tried to ignore the stares and whispers, but it was hard. A small blue alien with 4 eyes jumped out of her way when she got close. Another alien that looked like a walking tree moved to the other side of the hallway when he saw her coming. The registration office was full of new cadets filling out forms and getting their room assignments. Hana got in line behind a tall alien with silver skin and no hair. The alien turned around to look at her, and his eyes got very wide. "Are you really a human?" the alien asked in a voice that sounded like wind chimes. "Yes, I am," Hana said, trying to sound friendly. "I have never seen a real human before," the alien said. "You look smaller than I thought you would," Hana smiled. "Most people expect us to be bigger," she said. "The stories say humans are incredibly strong," the alien continued. "Is that true?" "Some of us are," Hana said, not wanting to brag. The line moved forward, and soon it was Hana's turn to register. The clerk was a round alien with tentacles instead of arms. She looked at Hana with surprise and then checked her computer screen 3 times. "You are Hana Kim from Earth," the clerk said. "That is correct," Hana replied. "You are only the 3rd human to ever attend this academy," the clerk said while typing with her tentacles. "Your room assignment is in Building 7, Level 12, Room 847. Your roommate is already there." Hana took her room key and information packet, then followed the signs to Building 7. The hallways were full of cadets moving their belongings and saying goodbye to their families. Hana noticed that most of the families were very different from human families. Some had dozens of relatives all saying goodbye at once. Others had parents that were completely different species from their children. Building 7 was newer than the others and had better lighting. Hana took the elevator to level 12 and found room 847. She used her key to open the door and walked inside. The room was bigger than she expected, with 2 beds, 2 desks, and a large window that looked out over the training grounds. One bed already had belongings on it, so Hana put her bag on the empty bed. She was unpacking her few clothes when the door opened. Her roommate walked in, and Hana was surprised by how beautiful he was. He had pale skin that seemed to glow with its own light and silver hair that moved like water. His eyes were the color of ice, and when he saw Hana, he smiled nervously. "You must be my roommate," he said. "I am Cairo from Valaris. I am Hana from Earth," she replied. Cairo's eyes got wide, just like everyone else who learned she was human. He sat down on his bed and looked at her carefully. "I have heard many stories about humans," he said quietly. "Some of them are quite frightening." Hana sat down on her own bed. "Most of the stories are not true," she said. "We are not monsters." Cairo nodded, but she could tell he was still nervous. "On Valaris, we are taught that predator species are very dangerous," he said. "Humans are the ultimate predators, according to our teachers," Hana sighed. She had heard this before. "It is true that Earth is a dangerous planet," she said. "And it is true that humans had to fight to survive. But that does not make us evil." Cairo seemed to relax a little. "I did not say you were evil," he said. "Just dangerous. There is a difference." Over the next hour, Cairo told Hana about the academy and how it worked. He explained that there were strict rules about fighting and that cadets who caused trouble would be expelled immediately. He also warned her about some of the older cadets who did not like newcomers, especially human newcomers. "There is a group of fourth-year cadets who think they run this place," Cairo said. "Their leader is named Torwin, and he is from Nexari. Think they are better than everyone else, and Torwin thinks he is better than most Nexari. What do they do to cadets they do not like?" Hana asked. "They make life difficult," Cairo said. "They play pranks and spread rumors. Sometimes they challenge people to fights, but only when they know they will win." Hana nodded. She had dealt with bullies before. On Earth, she had learned to stand up for herself, and she was not going to change that now. That evening, all the new cadets gathered in the main auditorium for orientation. Commander Voss stood at the front of the room, and Hana was impressed by how large and intimidating he looked. He had 4 arms and stood at least 8 feet tall. His voice was deep and seemed to shake the walls when he spoke. "Welcome to Nexus," Prime Military Academy Commander Voss said. "You are here because you represent the best your species has to offer. But being the best on your home world does not guarantee success here." He looked around the room and his eyes seemed to stop on Hana for a moment longer than the others. "This academy has the highest standards in the galaxy," Commander Voss continued. "We do not accept excuses. We do not accept failure. Half of you will not graduate. Those who do graduate will become the finest military officers in galactic history." The commander went on to explain the rules and expectations. Hana listened carefully and took notes. She noticed that several older cadets were sitting in the back of the auditorium watching the new students. One of them was pointing at her and whispering to his friends. After orientation, the new cadets were dismissed to return to their rooms. As Hana was leaving, she felt someone watching her. She turned around and saw a group of older cadets staring at her with unfriendly expressions. The one in the center was taller than the others, with dark blue skin and yellow eyes. He had the arrogant look of someone who thought he was very important. Cairo hurried up beside her. "That is Torwin," he whispered. "The one I warned you about." Hana looked at Torwin and their eyes met across the auditorium. He smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who had just found a new target. Hana did not look away. She stared right back at him until he finally turned away to talk to his friends. "That was not smart," Cairo said as they walked back to their room. "Maybe not," Hana replied. "But I will not be intimidated." As they entered their building, Hana could not shake the feeling that her troubles at the academy were just beginning. The attack began exactly as Torwin had planned it. Zix launched himself from Hana's left side, using his powerful silithid legs to propel his body through the air like a missile. At the same moment, Kresh charged straight at her from the front, trusting his massive Gorvan bulk to overwhelm her with pure force. This was a classic pincer movement designed to give the target no chance to escape. Most galactic species would have been crushed between the two attackers, or forced to flee directly into the waiting arms of Torwin and Veltar. It was a simple, effective tactic that had worked countless times before. But Hana was not most galactic species. Time seemed to slow down as her human reflexes kicked in. Adrenaline flooded her system and her heart rate doubled in an instant. Her pupils dilated to take in more light, and her breathing became deep and controlled. Every sense became sharper, and her mind focused with laser precision on the threats. Around her, she could see Zix's trajectory through the air and calculate exactly where he would land. She could hear Kresh's heavy footsteps and feel the vibrations through the floor. Behind her, she could sense Torwin and Veltar moving to cut off her retreat. Her human brain processed all of this information in a fraction of a second. Instead of trying to dodge or flee, Hana did something that surprised all four of her attackers. She dropped low into a crouch and then exploded upward with all the power her earth-trained muscles could provide. Zix had expected to hit a standing target, but instead found himself flying over Hana's head. As he passed above her, she reached up and grabbed him around the torso with both hands. Her human grip strength closed like a steel trap around his thin, silithid body. Hana twisted her entire body and used Zix's own momentum against him. She hurled him upward with tremendous force, sending him crashing into the ceiling panels above. The reinforced metal panels buckled under the impact, and Zix fell back to the floor in a shower of debris and sparks from damaged lighting. The entire exchange took less than 2 seconds. Kresh had expected his massive bulk to bowl over the small human female, but instead he found himself running into what felt like a stone wall. Hana had planted her feet and lowered her shoulder to meet his charge head-on. The collision would have killed most species outright. Kresh massed nearly 3 times what Hana did and was moving at full speed when they impacted. But Hana's human skeleton was built from dense calcium phosphate, designed to withstand the crushing gravity of Earth. Her bones did not break under the impact. Instead, it was Kresh who suffered, as Hana absorbed his charge and redirected his energy. She wrapped her arms around his thick waist and used her leg muscles to lift him off the ground. Then she pivoted and threw him sideways with all her strength. Kresh's massive body sailed through the air and crashed into 3 rows of student desks. Metal bent and sparks flew as his rocky hide scraped across the floor. He tried to get back up, but his head was spinning from the impact, and he could not focus his vision. 4 seconds had passed since the attack began. Veltar had been circling around to attack Hana from behind, but the destruction of his 2 companions had shocked him into hesitation. He had expected this to be a simple beatdown of an outnumbered opponent. Instead, he was watching the human female dismantle his friends with terrifying efficiency. But Veltar was a warrior from a proud species, and his honor demanded that he continue the fight. He used his natural Korthak flexibility to wrap his long arms around Hana's neck from behind. His species were expert grapplers who could twist their limbs in ways that would break the bones of other species. Hana felt Veltar's arms close around her throat and knew she had only seconds before he could apply enough pressure to cut off her blood flow. She reached up and grabbed his forearms with both hands. Then she demonstrated why human grip strength was legendary. Throughout the galaxy, Veltar screamed as Hana's fingers crushed down on his hollow Korthak bones. His grip loosened immediately as pain shot through his arms. Hana spun around and grabbed him by the shoulders, then lifted him off the ground as if he weighed nothing. She could have thrown him across the room like she had done to Kresh. Instead, she chose to be merciful and simply slammed him down onto one of the student desks. The metal desk crumpled under the impact, and Veltar lay motionless among the wreckage. 7 seconds had elapsed. Torwin had been watching the destruction of his carefully planned ambush with growing horror. 3 of his companions were down, and the human had barely worked up a sweat. This was not how things were supposed to go. Humans were supposed to be primitive brutes who relied on crude strength, not tactical fighters who could dismantle trained opponents with surgical precision. But Torwin was not ready to admit defeat. He was the leader of this group, and his reputation was at stake. If word got out that he had been defeated by a single human female, he would be laughed out of the academy. He pulled out a training blade from his belt. The weapon was designed for practice combat and was not supposed to cause permanent damage, but in the hands of a desperate fourth-year cadet, it could still be lethal if used with enough force. Torwin raised the blade above his head and lunged at Hana's back. He planned to strike her between the shoulder blades where the wound would be painful, but not fatal. He would show this human that there were consequences for defying her betters. But Hana's human senses had been tracking him throughout the entire fight. She could hear his breathing and smell his fierce sweat. When he moved to attack, she was already turning to meet him. She caught his wrist in mid-swing and stopped the blade just inches from her chest. Torwin stared in shock as his weapon was held, motionless by the human's iron grip. He put all his strength into trying to complete the attack, but Hana's hand did not budge even slightly. Then Hana smiled, and Torwin felt true fear for the first time in his life. She twisted his wrist with a sharp motion that sent the training blade spinning across the room. Then she grabbed him by the front of his uniform and lifted him up until his feet were off the ground. For a moment, they stared at each other, and Torwin could see something primal and dangerous in her human eyes. Hana spun around and hurled Torwin toward the large reinforced window that looked out over the academy grounds. The window was made of transparent aluminum designed to withstand micrometeorite impacts and small explosions. It was supposed to be unbreakable. Torwin hit the window with tremendous force, and the entire panel spider webbed with cracks radiating out from the impact. Point. He bounced off the damaged window and fell to the floor where he lay groaning and clutching his ribs. 12 seconds had passed since the attack began. Hana stood in the center of the destroyed classroom, breathing heavily, but otherwise uninjured. Around her lay the wreckage of desks and equipment, along with 4 senior cadets who had learned a painful lesson about underestimating humans. Zix was unconscious with several broken ribs from his impact with the ceiling. Kresh was trying to sit up but could not focus his vision properly. Veltar was moaning softly as he held his damaged arms. Torwin was curled up in a ball next to the cracked window, making whimpering sounds. The security alarms began blaring as the Academy's automated systems detected the violence and structural damage. Emergency lights flashed red, and the computer voice announced that security teams were on their way. Hana walked over to her desk and calmly gathered her study notes. She sat down and continued reviewing her hyperspace calculations as if nothing had happened. When the security teams arrived, they would find her sitting quietly in the middle of the chaos reading her textbook. She looked around at the 4 cadets, who had thought they could intimidate a human through violence. They had learned the hard way that humans did not become the dominant species on Earth by backing down from fights. The galaxy was about to learn the same lesson. 3 weeks had passed since the incident with Veltar, and Hana was still trying to repair her reputation at the Academy. She spent extra time studying and volunteered for additional training exercises. She hoped that by working harder than everyone else, she could prove that humans were not just violent savages. Her grades were excellent, and several instructors had praised her tactical thinking during war game simulations. But the other cadets still avoided her, and whispers followed her wherever she went. Some students had started calling her the bone breaker behind her back. Veltar had returned to classes with his wrist in a healing brace. He refused to look at. Hana and his friends made sure she knew how much they blamed her for his injury. During group exercises, they would request different partners rather than work with the dangerous human. Torwin had not approached Hana directly since their encounter in the library, but she could feel him watching her. His friends would make comments when she passed them in the hallways. They would bump into her by accident and then apologize with fake smiles. Hana knew they were testing her, trying to provoke a reaction. On this particular morning, Hana woke, up feeling restless. She had been having strange dreams about Earth and her family. In the dreams, she was back home in the mountains where she had grown up. She could smell the pine trees and feel the rough bark under her hands. But when she tried to go home in the dream, she found that the path was blocked. Cairo was already gone when she woke up. He had an early morning class in xenobiology, while Hana's first class was not until later. She decided to go to the Advanced Stellar Navigation classroom early to review her notes. There was going to be a quiz on hyperspace calculations, and she wanted to make sure she understood the material perfectly. The hallways were mostly empty as Hana made her way to the academic building. A few early rising cadets nodded to her as they passed, but most ignored her completely. She had gotten used to being invisible to her fellow students. The Advanced Stellar Navigation classroom was on the third floor of the academic building. It was a large room with holographic displays that could show three-dimensional star charts. The desks were arranged in a semicircle facing the main display screen. Hana used her access card to enter the empty classroom. The lights came on automatically, and she chose a desk in the front row where she would have a good view of the displays. She spread out her notes and began reviewing the complex mathematics involved in plotting courses through hyperspace. The material was challenging even for someone with Hana's intelligence. Hyperspace navigation required understanding of physics concepts that did not exist on Earth. She had to think in 11 dimensions instead of the 3 that human brains were designed for. As she studied, Hana became aware of a strange feeling. Something was wrong, but she could not identify what it was. The classroom looked normal, and she could not hear anything unusual. But millions of years of human evolution had given her instincts that were finely tuned to detect danger. The air circulation system sounded different than usual. There was a faint humming that had not been there before, and there was a smell in the air that seemed out of place. It was musky and sharp, like the scent of fear or aggression. Hana looked up from her notes and listened carefully. The building was supposed to be nearly empty at this hour, but she could sense that she was not alone. Someone else was in the classroom with her. She turned around slowly and saw nothing at first. The rows of desks behind her were empty, and the doors were closed. But her instincts told her that predators were nearby, and those instincts had kept her ancestors alive on Earth's deadly surface. Then she saw movement in the shadows near the back of the room. A figure stepped out from behind a storage cabinet, and Hana recognized Torwin immediately. His yellow eyes gleamed in the dim light, and his blue skin looked almost black in the shadows. "Well, well, well," he said, walking toward her desk. "The little Deathworlder is here early." Hana remained seated, but every muscle in her body was ready for action. She could feel adrenaline starting to flow through her system as her body prepared for fight or flight. But she kept her voice calm and steady. "What do you want, Torwin?" she asked. 3 more figures emerged from hiding spots around the classroom. Hana recognized them all. There was Veltar with his healing brace still visible on his wrist. Kresh was a massive Gorvan with rocky skin and arms like tree trunks. Zix was a Silithid with 6 limbs and movements so quick they were hard to follow. They had positioned themselves strategically around the room to cut off all her escape routes. This was not a chance encounter or a coincidence. They had planned this carefully and probably waited for the perfect opportunity. "I want to have a conversation with you," Torwin said as he continued walking toward her. "A private conversation about respect and proper behavior. The security cameras in this room have been having technical difficulties," Kresh added with a rumbling laugh. "They will not be recording anything for the next few hours." Hana stood up slowly. Her human brain was analyzing the tactical situation automatically. 4 opponents with superior numbers and position, unknown weapons or abilities. Confined space with limited escape routes. Her training kicked in and she began calculating her options. "You cannot do this," she said, hoping to buy time. "The Academy has strict rules about unsanctioned violence." "The Academy has rules about many things," Torwin replied. "But sometimes rules need to be enforced by those who understand their true meaning." Veltar stepped forward, and Hana could see hatred in his eyes. "You broke my wrist," he said. "In my culture, that is an act of war." "It was an accident," Hana said, backing away from him. I already apologized. Your apology is not accepted, Veltar hissed. You have brought dishonor to my family. Zix moved to Hana's left, sighed with fluid movements that reminded her of a spider. We are not going to hurt you badly, he said in a voice like rustling leaves. We just want you to understand your place here. And what place is that? Hana asked, though she already knew the answer. Below us, Torwin said with a cruel smile. You are going to apologize to each of us publicly. You are going to request a transfer to a less prestigious program. And you are going to admit that humans do not belong in elite military training. Hana looked around the room at the 4 aliens surrounding her. They were all larger and stronger than most species she had encountered at the academy. They had planned this ambush carefully and thought they had overwhelming advantages. What they did not understand was that Hana came from a world where being outnumbered was normal. On Earth, humans had survived by fighting predators that were bigger, faster, and stronger than they were. Her ancestors had faced down saber-toothed cats and cave bears with nothing but primitive weapons and their wits. And what if I refuse, Hana asked. Then we will have to convince you, Torwin said. He made a gesture, and his 3 companions began moving closer. Hana could see that negotiation was no longer possible. These 4 cadets had decided to teach her a lesson, and they would not be satisfied with words. They expected her to submit, or be beaten into submission like most other species would do when faced with superior numbers. But Hana was not most other species. She was human. And humans had a reputation in the galaxy for a very good reason. I will not apologize, she said clearly. I will not transfer. And I will not admit that humans do not belong here. Then you have chosen poorly, Torwin said. He nodded to his companions, and they began their attack. What happened next would become the stuff of legend at Nexus Prime Military Academy. It would be discussed in hushed whispers by cadets for years to come, and it would forever change how the galaxy viewed the species from the small blue planet called Earth. Hana smiled for the first time in weeks. Finally, something was happening that made sense to her. This was not politics or diplomacy or trying to fit in with alien cultures. This was simple and direct and exactly what her human instincts were designed to handle. 4 predators had cornered their prey in a confined space, but they had made one critical mistake in their calculations. They had forgotten that sometimes the prey turns out to be the predator. The news of what happened at Nexus Prime spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Within a week, every military academy and defense installation had heard about the human cadet who hospitalized 4 seniors in 12 seconds. The HFY story grew with each telling until some versions had Hana fighting off dozens of attackers single-handedly. The Galactic Defense Corps found itself facing a crisis it had never anticipated. For decades, they had been trying to recruit from death, worlds to add strength and ferocity to their forces. But they had never fully understood what that meant in practical terms. The Hana incident forced them to confront uncomfortable truths about the species they were inviting into their ranks. A special tribunal was convened on the capital world of New Geneva to address the broader implications of the incident. Representatives from over 50 species gathered to debate whether Deathworld species should be allowed in elite military training programs. The discussion was heated and often ugly. The Nexari delegation, led by Senator Velkresh, argued that Deathworlders were too dangerous to be trusted with advanced military training. They presented medical reports showing the extent of injuries that Hana had inflicted and claimed that such violence had no place in civilized society. The human delegation was small but determined. Ambassador Chenwei argued that humans had been defending themselves and that the Academy's failure to prevent the attack was the real problem. She pointed out that humans had served with distinction in the limited roles they had been allowed to fill, but it was the testimony of the cadets themselves that proved most compelling. Over a dozen students from Nexus Prime appeared before the tribunal to describe what they had witnessed. Their accounts painted a picture of systematic harassment and premeditated assault that could not be ignored. Cairo was among those who testified. He described how Torwin and his friends had been threatening Hana for weeks and how the academy administration had failed to intervene. He explained that the 4 seniors had sabotaged security cameras and planned an ambush designed to force Hana out of the academy. The tribunal also heard from medical experts who analyzed the injuries inflicted during the fight. Dr. Yirasan, a Nexari physician, explained that Hana's response had been proportional by Deathworld standards. What seemed like excessive violence to civilized species was actually remarkable restraint for someone from Earth. The most important testimony came from Commander Voss himself. The veteran officer admitted that the Academy's integration protocols were completely inadequate for Deathworld species. He recommended sweeping changes to prevent similar incidents in the future. After 2 weeks of debate, the tribunal reached a groundbreaking decision. Deathworld species would not be banned from military service, but new protocols would be established to ensure proper integration. Hana would become the first student in a pilot program designed to bridge the gap between Deathworld ferocity and galactic cooperation. The new protocols required Deathworld cadets to undergo specialized training in restraint and proportional response. They would be paired with mentors from more peaceful species who could help them understand galactic social norms. Combat training would be modified to account for their superior physical capabilities. Hana returned to Nexus Prime to find that everything had changed. The Academy had established a new department called Interspecies Integration, headed by a joint council of representatives from different worlds. Special facilities were built to accommodate students with unusual physical requirements. But the biggest change was in the attitude of her fellow cadets. The fear and suspicion were still there, but they were mixed with a grudging respect. Students who had once avoided her now approached cautiously, seeking to understand this strange human who could be both terrifyingly violent and surprisingly gentle. The nickname 12-Second Storm followed Hana everywhere she went. Some cadets used it mockingly, but others said it with genuine admiration. She had become a legend, whether she wanted to or not. Her academic performance continued to excel, and her tactical innovations impressed even the most senior instructors. But it was her work with other students that proved most valuable. Hana began teaching restraint techniques to Deathworld cadets while learning diplomacy from more peaceful species. Cairo remained her closest friend and helped her navigate the complex social dynamics of the Academy. He translated cultural subtleties that Hana missed and helped her understand when other students were being friendly versus hostile. In return, she protected him from bullies and helped him with combat training. New human cadets began arriving at the Academy as word spread that the integration program was working. Each one brought their own challenges and perspectives, but they all looked to Hana as their unofficial leader. She took this responsibility seriously and worked to ensure that each new human student understood both their capabilities and their limitations. The 4 cadets who had attacked Hana faced their own consequences. Torwin was expelled from the Academy, and his family's political connections could not save him. Veltar and Kresh were suspended for a full year and required to undergo counseling before returning. Zix recovered from his injuries but transferred to a different academy where his reputation had not preceded him. Years passed, and Hana graduated with highest honors. She was commissioned as a lieutenant in the Galactic Defense Corps and assigned to lead the first mixed species combat unit. Her squad included representatives from 8 different worlds, each bringing unique skills and perspectives to their missions. The unit's success exceeded all expectations. Hana's tactical brilliance, combined with her team's diverse abilities, made them one of the most effective forces in the galaxy. They completed missions that had been considered impossible, and their casualty rates were the lowest in the Corps. Other military organizations began adopting the integration protocols that had been developed at Nexus Prime. Deathworld species were recruited not just for their strength, but for their strategic thinking and problem-solving abilities. The galaxy learned that diversity of thought was just as valuable as diversity of capability. Hana eventually rose to the rank of commander and returned to Nexus Prime as an instructor. She taught courses in both combat tactics and interspecies cooperation. Her classroom was the same one where she had fought 4 attackers years earlier, but it had been completely renovated and expanded. The cracked window had been replaced with a memorial plaque that read, "In memory of ignorance overcome." By understanding, it served as a reminder that progress often comes through conflict, but that conflict should lead to greater wisdom, not greater division. New cadets would often ask Hana about the legendary fight that had changed everything. She would tell them that the real victory was not defeating 4 bullies in 12 seconds. The real victory was proving that different species could work together despite their differences. The Academy now graduated hundreds of Deathworld cadets each year, and they served throughout the galaxy with distinction. Pirates and hostile aliens had learned to fear mixed species units that combined Deathworld ferocity with galactic technology and tactics. But Hana's greatest pride was not in the fear her species inspired, but in the friendships they had built. The galaxy had learned that Deathworlders were not monsters to be contained, but allies to be embraced. That lesson had been written in pain and struggle, but it had created a stronger, more unified civilization. Standing in her classroom, watching a new group of cadets from dozens of different worlds, Hana reflected on how far they had all come. The scared human girl who had arrived at Nexus Prime years ago could never have imagined the changes that would follow that 12-second fight. The galaxy was a bigger, more complex place than Earth had ever been, but humans had found their place in it, not by changing who they were, but by showing others who they could become. And that was a victory worth more than any fight could ever be. The first security team arrived within 3 minutes of the alarms going off. They burst through the classroom door expecting to find a terrorist attack or some kind of catastrophic equipment failure. Instead, they found 4 senior cadets requiring immediate medical attention and 1 human female sitting calmly at a desk reading her notes. The lead security officer was a veteran Zentorian named Captain Rex, who had seen combat on 17 different worlds. He looked around the destroyed classroom and tried to make sense of what had happened. Desks were overturned and scattered across the floor. The ceiling panels were damaged and sparking. One of the reinforced windows had a spider web of cracks running through it. Medical teams rushed in behind the security officers and began treating the injured cadets. Zix was unconscious and had to be carried out on a stretcher. His breathing was shallow and several of his ribs were clearly broken. Kresh was awake but could not stand up properly. His balance was completely off and he kept trying to grab onto things that were not there. Veltar was conscious but in severe pain. His arms were bent at unnatural angles and the medics had to give him strong painkillers before they could move him. Torwin was the worst off even though he was awake. He had multiple fractures in his ribs and possibly internal bleeding from his impact with the window. Captain Rex approached Hana, who was still sitting at her desk. She looked up from her notes with a calm expression, as if injured cadets were carried past her every day. "Cadet Kim," he said in his deep Zentorian voice. "Can you explain what happened here?" Hana closed her textbook and stood up. "4 senior cadets ambushed me," she said simply. "They demanded that I apologize publicly and transfer to a different program. When I refused, they attacked me." Captain Rex looked around the classroom again. The damage was extensive and clearly the result of extreme violence. But the human cadet standing in front of him showed no signs of injury. Her uniform was not even wrinkled. "You are claiming that 4 senior cadets attacked you," he said, "and you defended yourself. That is correct." Hana replied. Captain Rex had difficulty believing this. The 4 injured cadets were all larger and supposedly stronger than the small human female. How could one person cause so much damage in such a short time? How long did this fight last? He asked. 12 seconds, Hana said after thinking for a moment. The security officer stared at her. 12 seconds, he repeated. Maybe 13, Hana corrected. I was not timing it precisely. The investigation that followed was unlike anything in the Academy's history. Security teams searched the classroom for evidence and found that the cameras had indeed been sabotaged, just as Hana claimed. Someone had used sophisticated equipment to create a blind spot in the surveillance system. Interviews with other cadets revealed that Torwin and his friends had been planning something against Hana for weeks. Several students had overheard them talking about teaching the human a lesson. Others had seen them practicing coordinated attacks in the training rooms. But the physical evidence told the most compelling story. Forensic analysis of the classroom showed exactly how the fight had unfolded. Zix's impact point on the ceiling was clearly visible. Kresh's trajectory through the desks could be traced by the pattern of damage. The cracked window still bore the outline of Torwin's body. Commander Voss personally reviewed the case and found himself facing an unprecedented situation. Academy regulations were clear about unsanctioned violence between cadets. But those regulations had been written assuming that such fights would involve relatively minor injuries at worst. The commander called Hana to his office 3 days after the incident. She entered and stood at attention while he reviewed her file on his computer screen. Her academic performance was excellent, and her conduct record was spotless except for the training accident with Veltar weeks earlier, Cadet Kim Commander Voss said without looking up. Do you understand the seriousness of what happened? Yes, Sir Hana replied. 4 cadets were injured during an unprovoked attack. The commander finally looked at her. An attack that you claim was in self-defense. It was self-defense, Sir Hana said. I have witnesses who can testify that Torwin and his friends had been threatening me for weeks. Commander Voss leaned back in his chair. The problem, Cadet Kim, is not whether you were defending yourself. The problem is the extent of the injuries you inflicted. Hana remained silent. She could see where this conversation was heading. Zix has a punctured lung and will be in the medical bay for 2 weeks. Commander, Voss continued. Kresh suffered severe concussion and is still having vision problems. Veltar's arms were dislocated in 3 places. And Torwin has internal bleeding that required emergency surgery. I held back as much as I could, sir, Hana said quietly. You held back, Commander Voss repeated incredulously. This is what it looks like when you hold back, yes, Sir Hana replied. On Earth, this would be considered a minor disagreement. The commander stared at her for a long moment. He was beginning to understand that the Academy's integration protocols were completely inadequate for species from death worlds. The regulations assumed that all cadets had roughly similar physical capabilities. No one had planned for students who could casually inflict life-threatening injuries during routine conflicts. The review board that convened to decide Hana's fate included representatives from 12 different species. They spent hours analyzing the evidence and debating the implications. Some members argued that Hana should be expelled immediately for excessive violence. Others insisted that she had been defending herself against an unprovoked attack. The deciding factor was testimony from other cadets who had witnessed Torwin's harassment campaign. It became clear that the 4 seniors had planned and executed a premeditated assault on a fellow student. Under Academy regulations, this was grounds for immediate expulsion, but the board still had to address the disproportionate response. Hana had defended herself using force that far exceeded what was necessary to stop the attack. The injuries she inflicted were severe enough to end military careers. After 3 days of deliberation, the review board reached a compromise decision. Hana would not be expelled, but she would face significant restrictions. She would be required to attend special counseling sessions about proportional response. Her combat training would be modified to focus on restraint and control. and she would be monitored closely for any future incidents. When Hana learned of the decision, she felt a mixture of relief and frustration. She had been allowed to stay at the academy, but under conditions that made her feel like a dangerous animal being kept in a cage. The other cadets now looked at her with a combination of fear and awe that made normal relationships impossible. Cairo was one of the few students who still treated her normally. He visited her room the evening after the board's decision was announced and found her staring out the window at the academy grounds. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Like I do not belong here," Hana replied without turning around. "You defended yourself," Cairo said. "No one can fault you for that. The board thinks I used excessive force," Hana said. "They want me to learn restraint." Cairo sat down on his bed. "Maybe they are right," he said carefully. "Maybe humans need to learn different ways of handling conflict." Hana finally turned to look at him. "On Earth, we learned that predators respect strength," she said. "Showing weakness only encourages more attacks. But this is not Earth," Cairo pointed out. "This is a civilized society with rules and laws." Hana nodded slowly. She was beginning to understand that surviving at the academy would require more than just academic excellence or combat skills. She would need to learn how to be human in a galaxy that was not designed for her species. The incident had solved her immediate problem with Torwin and his friends. None of them would be bothering her again anytime soon. But it had created new challenges that would be much harder to overcome. Word of the fight spread throughout the academy and beyond. Within days, every cadet knew about the human who had hospitalized 4 seniors in 12 seconds. Some students avoided her completely, while others sought her out, hoping to learn from her. But none of them saw her as just another cadet anymore. Hana had wanted to prove that humans could fit in with galactic society. Instead, she had reminded everyone why humans were feared throughout the galaxy. The question now was whether she could find a way to bridge that gap and show that Deathworld ferocity could coexist with civilized cooperation. The answer would determine not just her future, but the future of human integration into galactic civilization.